Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted my network, colleagues, friends, coworkers, business partners, old and new, anybody that I've met. I want to interview and have great conversations with these great leads on the books that have influenced their life, their work, their leadership. I want to get to those books that have contributed the most to what they do. In this particular series, I cover three categories of books. The first one they're introducing to me that I haven't read. The second one, a book that we've both read and we're discussing whether specifically for the series or we read it before the series in our past lives. The third category is where I'm lucky enough to have an author and or publisher on to talk about their book, the messaging, what they want to get out there to the public. So in this particular episode, my guest today is Autumn Carolynn. And Autumn received her bachelor's degree in English with an emphasis in creative writing from Illinois State University and Canterbury Christ Church University. She's a published author with Spoon River Poetry Review and has worked as an on-air DJ for 2 radio stations. Autumn produced a creative writing segment that aired on WGLT, an NPR station, which introduced writers from all over the Midwest and allowed them to share their work on air. Beyond her literary achievements, Autumn is an award-winning travel photographer, owner of Autumn Carolynn Photography. Her works can be found in multiple galleries, including the prestigious Northrup King Building, one of the largest art complexes in the U.S. Autumn reached out to me after having heard about the series. She has a book that she wants to share. This is a different take. It's more creative than the books that are usually covered in terms of obviously photography. I myself, admittedly, am a photography hobbyist, if you will. It's one of those things where I came across it because of a buddy of mine, and it's one of those therapies for me. It's one of those creative outlets. So I'm very interested in terms of where we can take this conversation, digging into Autumn's book, learning about her process, what drew her to photography, and putting out the book. So Autumn, thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me on.
So I always start off, who are you today? What's the kind of work that you're doing? Obviously it's very different than other conversations I've had because of the nature of your work, but what are you up to today? What is it that you're doing with your photography clients, if you will? What's the work that you're doing?
Sure. So I just published my book about 3 weeks ago. So currently in my stage of life, I am doing all things promotional for my book launch. I also have Autumn Carolyn Photography, which is my travel photography business. And I sell matted prints, canvases, all different types of things. And so I've been doing both at the same time right now.
And can you tell me how, I guess in general, what was it that when you were younger, when you start thinking about what you're going to do with your career, with your life, what were those steps going into trying to figure out what it is that you wanted to do? What did that path look like from then to now?
Yes. So when I was younger, I had always wanted to be a teacher. I thought being a teacher would be the path for me. And I took invitation to teach when I was in high school. So I taught first grade. And as I was going through the program, I realized how I was not built for teaching. And it kind of was a huge shift for me because I had thought about it my whole life. And when I graduated from college, I had my last semester, which I studied abroad in Canterbury Christ Church University. And studying
That's
abroad,
where Autumn is at, New Zealand?
it is in Canterbury, England.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And I just took this opportunity to explore and travel to as many countries as I could. So I had a goal to do 13 countries within 13 weeks. And
Wow.
every weekend, I would fly to a new country, stay in that country for 4 days, and fly back to England to get in time for my classes, which were on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Wow. So many questions just from that. So originally when you wanted to go into teaching, was there somebody in your family? Did you see it, in your community? Or was it just kind of innate that that's maybe that you were drawn to it? What was it that first kind of guided you on that path towards teaching? and then we can talk about, everything else.
Yes. What really drew me into wanting to be a teacher was when I was in elementary school, I was severely bullied. And it got to a point where I had to switch schools. It was terrible. And I had always wished that there was a teacher that would have done something for me because I went to a Catholic school and it was a whole different persona versus a public school and different experience for me. And I just remember being this little fourth grader and crying because I never fit in with anyone and just wishing that there would have been someone with a authority that would have been able to recognize and help with the situation. And I think that that had really resonated with me growing up because I wanted to give back and I wanted to be there for other students that were in my position. But then when I did teach first grade, it was just a whole different realm that I had no idea how much work actually goes into teaching and what comes of it. So that's kind of been the paradigm shift for me. I still feel like there's a part of me that still wants to do that for young children, but maybe not in the way that I had thought about all these years.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, teachers just having, one kid in grammar school, the other one, the second one in daycare, or the second and third one in daycare, just seeing what they go through, what they do on the clock, off the clock, the emotion that they can put into it if you have like the right teacher, right? They're really dedicated.
Mhm.
I mean, for me, like compensation in life should go like cops, firefighters, teachers, and then like CEOs right below them.
Mhm.
Um, so it's amazing what they do, but I think what you said at the end, like maybe there is a possibility of you doing that because I've thought about um, just thinking about how I felt as a kid and then how I want my kids to feel,
Mhm.
getting them those creative outlets, right? I didn't find my creative outlets till I was in my 30s.
Mhm.
Um, I did okay, before that I survived, but I think there's something about those creative outlets that help you find who you are, that help you show others who you are. So I'm always thinking, okay, when can I start doing that with him? When can I take him out when I want to go out with my camera on the road, just drive around the state looking for landscapes or whatever the photography may be. I want to bring him along because I think that that creative outlet is just so important.
Definitely.
Um, so I mean, have you considered uh maybe like building a branch of your business or your work that incorporates, I mean, it doesn't have to be grade school kids, but I think that path is just so therapeutic. I know it is for me. That's when I first experienced flow, where when I was out there with my camera just by myself, that is, I think, still where I've been the most present in what I was doing. I wasn't thinking about any regrets of the past or concerns of the past. I wasn't anxious about anything in the future. Writing does that for me now, but there's something about the photography where I just understand its power. So in your travels when you were going overseas and then coming back, so where did that go from there? How did you find your way into photography?
Sure. So I have actually a similar background with photography because my dad did photography. And I remember growing up that he would have his old Nikon camera in our basement, and he had just a plethora of different photographs that he would show me growing up. And I remember thinking, I want to be just like my dad. And, I had this opportunity to take a film photography course when I was in high school. I used the same camera that my dad used for that particular course, and I just completely fell in love. I kept on wanting to do more. I wanted to have more subjects, have more experience. And it kind of, my worlds collided when I studied abroad because I brought my first DSLR Sony camera with me, or no, it was a Nikon D5100. And I brought that with me And it was just this experience where I could travel, but I could also take pictures at the same time. And it was just, when you're talking about flow, when you're talking about not thinking about the past and not thinking about the future and being there in the moment, that's what travel did to me, because I was constantly thinking about, okay, what am I going to do for dinner? And I just met these people and I want to hang out with them and get to know them better. And so it just it put me in a position where I had to think on my feet and I had to treasure the moment as it was.
I'm not really a big traveler. Like, I know I have a lot of friends. Actually, two of my best friends just took off 2 weeks ago to travel. They were going down to South America for a month because that's where Julie's from. And then they were just kind of like open after that. They both quit their jobs. They had saved enough to leave everything behind. They're just going to travel the world. Me, I've never been drawn to that overseas, but I've been drawn to I love road trips.
Mhm.
And even in college, there was something about if you took a road trip, how liberating, how free that could be because you were always exploring.
Yes.
As opposed to like the monotony of, okay, I'm in my dorm room, okay, I'm with my fraternity brothers, okay, we're going out to eat. It was like the same old thing over and over. There was something freeing and liberating about just going somewhere, exploring. Um, how easily I could talk to strangers because I wanted to learn about people. Not that my friends weren't interesting, but there was just something that brought me to life anytime I went on a road trip. So I can relate in terms of just getting out and seeing what's out there.
Yes.
So, okay, so you bring the camera. So where do you go from there when you're traveling? You're taking the pictures. You have your camera. I guess at what point does it turn into, okay, this is my thing. This is what I want to do with my life and career.
Yes. So I started when I studied abroad, I had completed my goal of 13 countries in 13 weeks. And when I came back, I graduated from my college, I got my degree, and I basically wanted to travel full time. I wanted to figure out a way to be able to do that. And I put my application in to be a flight attendant. So I got the job position, which was super hectic when it comes to interviews and training. I have a lot of respect for flight attendants now that I have gone through that training. And then I just traveled as much as I could and I brought my camera with me. And when I was a flight attendant, the goal of traveling as much as I could turned into this idea of going to 30 countries before I turned 30 years old. And I had already had 13 countries because of my previous time when I was studying abroad. So I just continued with that goal. And as I was traveling throughout all of these different experiences, I had always brought a travel journal with me. And when I would be going from place to place, if I was on a train or a plane, if I had time in a hostel or a hotel, I would just continue to write. And that's kind of what prompted this, my goal, and what created Traveling in Wonder, which is my book.
Okay. So then at what point do you leave being a flight attendant? I don't even know if you still are.
Oh, no, that's
Okay.
okay. I'm
So
not.
at what point do you take that shift, that full-time jump to this being your career in life?
Yes, I got married. And when my husband and I were probably like a year after getting married, he was given a job position offer that was in a different state because we currently live in Minnesota. And that's where I was based, was in Minneapolis, was my hub. And when we moved, it was just really difficult when it came to commuting, especially as being a flight attendant because it's added on time.
Mhm.
And I had gotten hurt on, the plane with some luggage falling on me, and it just came a point in my life where I realized that I had flown for a few years, I had experienced it and loved it, but that I wanted to pursue something different. So when we moved to the next state, I quit being a flight attendant, but then I opened up the world of being a travel agent. So I switched my career, and being a travel agent was just really an incredible experience because now I could use what I learned when I was flying and when I was studying abroad to create trips for people who or clients that were interested in going somewhere but weren't quite sure exactly where to go or how to do it. So that's kind of my paradigm shift from travel agent.
Yeah, it's amazing that you keep those pieces you love the most as you jump from, education to your first job to travel agent. Okay, then what else?
So
On to
then
what?
so then we lived in Wisconsin for a few years. I was a travel agent, and then he got a job that was back in Minnesota because we had missed all things Minnesota and our friends here. So when we came back, that's when I shifted and I quit my job being a travel agent, and this was right around the time as the coronavirus was coming into play. So a lot of travel jobs has shut down due to the pandemic. And I just decided to start my own business. And this was in 2020. I had I had a closet full of all of my SD cards, all these pictures, and all of my travel journals that had just been sitting in my closet for
Wow.
ever. And so I went through and I took my travel journals and I was just putting them into this Word document. And I went through and edited. I had, I think, like 80,000 photographs that were on these SD cards. And I
Wow.
sorted through. And that was really my project for like 8 months. I just kept on writing and I kept on editing. And then that Word document turned into having the name of Traveling in Wonder. And that's where I had this idea to create a book, but also to create a business selling those photographs that no one had ever seen. And it'd been over 10 years, or I think it was like 8 years at the time of work. And that's kind of what prompted Autumn Carolyn Photography.
To be clear, I'm assuming you made the 30 countries by age 30, right?
Yes, I
That's just
did.
okay. Just want to circle back and just
Yeah.
clarify that. Um, so does it make sense that from your childhood, because I'm fascinated with just our childhoods and who we are as kids
Mhm.
versus who we are now, what we've brought forward, what we've left behind, what served us, what didn't. Does it make sense now, looking back on your childhood, that this is what you're doing? Not, it
Completely.
doesn't have to be directly, but more or less, it makes sense that this is where you are.
Completely. Because when I was a child, every year my parents would go to a different state during spring break because my mom always wanted us to see different monuments. So we would go to Washington, D.C. or Niagara Falls, the Grand Canyon, and we would take these road trips growing up. And I remember, having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and going from state to state, and I think that really prompted me to love the idea of travel. And I think at that time, I didn't realize how much it was making an impact in my life until when I became older. I was so thankful that we had taken all those road trips to different places across the US because I feel like it really prompted me to want to continue to travel.
That's amazing. Autumn, what does leadership mean to you? I have to ask just because it's the nature of my work, but I'm curious, what does leadership mean to you? What does great leadership look like?
I think leadership means to me, the first thing that pops in my head is empathy. I think if someone has empathy and carries empathy in their heart and is able to pursue their dreams and goals, but also have something in their heart that shares that they know where people are coming from, and maybe they have the leadership and there are people that are they're a manager or they own a company and they have employees that are listening to them or getting advice from them. I feel like being able to understand people is so important because everybody comes from all different walks of life, And if you are able to sit down with someone and really get to learn and know their story, it can make such a difference in their lives, but also in your life because you will always be learning something new.
Amen. And aside from the travels of your family during spring breaks, annual trip to different states, contributing to your photography, to your creative eye, as painful as the bullying was,
Mhm.
do you take anything away from that in terms of your growth, your evolution, what you appreciate because of that experience?
Completely. I think that it was really difficult. There were times where I thought and I had really dark thoughts because it was to the point that I didn't know what I was gonna do. And I think that having gone through that experience, I feel like I can understand so much more now than I could if I wouldn't have gone through that hard, really difficult experience. Because I think something that I see now that I didn't see back then is there are things that I can tune into, if a kid is being left out, or if you're having
Mm,
a group discussion and there's someone that's not really being part of the discussion and they're being quiet in like an office setting or in a corporate setting, I think having that idea of maybe I should just check in with them to make sure everything's okay. I think that that's been something that has really made a difference in my life because I've been there and I know what it's like to go through some really difficult and hardships. But I also think that that's made me so in tune with emotions and feelings that it can really make a difference in others' lives because if they're having a bad day or if there's someone in your circle that is going through something, they know that they can reach out to you because you are someone that can be comforting to them. But also, in that, I also think it shows that you can be a leader too.
absolutely. That's beautiful. Um, yeah, so much to say about that. And what I wanted to ask is, have you thought of, aside from formal teaching of students, young kids with photography, um, is there anything like that in your sights in terms of maybe not formally, but volunteering or anything with kids um, to just show them your work,
Mm,
show them, what they can tap into? Because it's amazing that you brought up that you wanted to go into teaching because you wish that there had been somebody that
mhm.
was in tune to you the way you are now, right?
Yeah,
Because they would have
yeah,
seen, they would have noticed, and
yeah.
um, so I just think that's so powerful for anybody to kind of learn and pay attention. Um, and in addition to getting help from the outside from somebody else, I'm always thinking, when I hear about situations like that, obviously some people can get lost,
Mhm,
where they don't understand their worth. Yeah, that they don't have anybody to point those out, it's not like you can point out to a kid, "This is exactly what you're meant for. This is exactly what's gonna put you on the right path at 30 years old, or what you're gonna be doing.
mhm.
This is exactly it." But fostering that curiosity in a child.
Yeah,
With my kids, I don't need him to do the oldest one, I don't need him to do this, I don't need him to do that, I don't need him to go into soccer, into karate, into this.
mhm.
I don't need him to pick one particular one, but I like testing to see where he's tapping into like his passion, and it's not going to be his lifelong passion. You never know, maybe, but something that gives him a high aside from school,
Mhm,
aside from home. Cause I
mhm.
remember that like your value is kind of, I'm a latchkey kid of immigrants. So it was very much school, home, school, home, school,
Sure,
home, both great environments, but you're limited to what you hear in those, and
sure.
you're not off in between finding what might be for you. So I'm just curious on your thoughts of volunteering with kids to show them just the beauty of whether they see the beauty in it. Some kids may be like, I could just look at a landscape and there it is, but others might see the the importance and the beauty of like you making something out of your world, maybe seeing it in a way that
Mm.
nobody else does.
That is such a good point. I honestly have not thought about combining photography and, reaching out with volunteering. My husband and I used to be youth group leaders. So we did that for a while, and that was such a rewarding experience for us. But I think now, being in a different state and having my own business, I honestly really haven't given it a lot of thought. So
Yeah.
that is definitely something that I should look into or think about.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot.
That's
No
okay.
pressure at all, but I think when somebody like you has your own experiences that gives you that
Yeah.
foresight that no one else has.
Mhm, mm.
Other people do, but I mean, certain people are just attuned to it.
Yeah,
So other people may be trained to look for, okay, which kid is quiet, and then other people can just feel it because
yeah,
they've been there. So
yeah.
that I just see the value in something like that. That's the only reason I bring it up. No pressure.
Thank you. Thank you so
You can
much.
still be my guest on the show.
Thank you.
So why don't we jump into the book? You had mentioned, the countless SD drives, SD cards that you went through, the countless journals, the months of writing. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what led up aside from that? Specifically, when did you start thinking of putting this particular book together?
Sure. It all really started with the pandemic. Honestly, it was really when I had that batch of time that everything was kind of slowed down in my world. And that's when just typing in this Word document was something that I felt like I could be able to really sit down with my thoughts from that many years ago. And that's kind of what prompted the whole idea. So, Traveling in Wonder is a four-part series, and it's based on four parts of my life, which we kind of talked through today. And so the
But
first
just to
part,
clarify,
uh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go
oh
ahead.
no, that's okay.
No, I was just
Uh,
about to ask if you could kind of, even though we've walked through them, if you could specifically recap what the sections are. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. So the first part is the Study Abroad series, and that goes through the 13 countries in 13 weeks. The second part is When I Am a Flight Attendant, and that goes through what it's like to get a call and go through the interviews and having to go through the intensive training, and then having your life be flipped upside down because you're moving to a new place and you're learning what it's like to travel for an airline. The third part is the travel agent series, and that goes through using your tools and tips and tricks for other clients and also using the benefits and the discounts for yourself. And then the four-part series is the Autumn Carolynn Photography series. And this is where I describe what it's like to start my own business and get the experience of getting that letter from the Secretary of State that says that you're official, and what it's like to start being prominent in art shows and art galleries and museums and exhibitions. So it all kind of goes through, but there's also this level in the book that talks about what it's like to be bullied, what it's like to have anxiety as an adult, and how I was able to reach the goal of 30 countries in 30 years.
So, Autumn, is it the one book, Traveling in Wonder, Travel Photographer's Tales of Wanderlust? Are the four sections in the book, or is it
Yes.
four? Okay, so they're all in there. Okay,
Yes. And at
so
oh, sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
At the end of each chapter, I also include photographs that are from the certain countries as a way for me to incorporate the photography aspect, but also the writing aspect.
Okay. All right, because even when we talked about doing this, I still had the impression that it was more visual than story, but it's the bulk of it is story
Mhm.
accompanied by okay. Okay. So would you say it is a memoir?
I would say so. I would say it's a memoir, but I would also say that it does touch on what it's like to have anxiety, but
Hmm.
more importantly, it talks about how one can't run away from trauma or feelings or being bullied as a kid. One can't run away from things that are popping up in your day-to-day life and as adult, and what it's like to take things and have a step back and to realize that traveling and go can be really helpful, but it can also be hindering too if you are constantly trying to get out of your own head instead of
Mhm.
looking inwardly and having that realization of, oh, maybe there's something here that I need to discover.
Yeah. That's a very good point when it comes to any kind of anxiety or mental health diagnoses or diagnosis is, especially, I guess that's the best example is traveling. You know what I mean? You can't it's gonna catch up with you.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter where you move,
Yeah.
that you have to find that happiness, that, um, contentment, that fulfillment, that familiarity with yourself in yourself. It doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't matter where you move, it doesn't matter what job you get, it's gonna follow you. So I appreciate you pointing that out. That's amazing that you point that out in the book because I think, just the general example of society where we're just we live in excess where we think buying more and more is going to make us happy, but if you're not happy before all that stuff,
Yeah.
that's just going to amplify that discomfort you have in your own skin.
Exactly. Mhm. Mhm.
So when did that click for you, in terms of your journey in growing up, your journey with anxiety? When did you? I think maybe most of us that deal with anxiety, there is like a
Mhm.
light bulb that goes off where it's kind of like, okay, this is what it is. This is
Mhm.
how I have to deal with it. These are my outlets. I
Mhm.
don't know about you. For me, there is no coping with it. I think it's just a part of us. I think we have
Yeah.
to live with it.
Yeah.
If I don't do the proactive work on mine,
Mhm.
I can feel it bubbling.
Yeah.
It's just a sensation it's just always there. It's always going to be there and I'm fine with it. But I've learned if it gets to a certain level, I got to either work out or I got to sit
Mhm.
down and write something or I
Mhm.
have to pick up my camera and go do something. Or there's just I've mentioned it here before. Most recently the last couple of weeks, just because this series has helped me a lot, just open up and talk about it,
Mm.
where I have to look for whether it's intellectual, spiritual, physical, emotional, that there's something that I have this extra energy for and I need to get it out of my system. So when did that happen for you? Maybe a realization that, okay, this isn't going away. This is how I have to deal with it. Or how do you speak to that? Not peace, because anybody with anxiety knows it's not peace,
Yeah.
but familiarity. Like I've looked it in
Mhm.
the face. We've introduced each other,
Mhm.
ourselves to each other. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
When was that point in your life where you became familiar with it, what it was, and realized what you needed for yourself to work with it, not past it, but with it?
I honestly believe that it was while I was writing this book, because as I'm going through each chapter, I'm seeing how the younger me is experiencing all these different emotions and having difficulty with expressing them. And then as the years go by and as each chapter goes through, I start to realize the progression of, why am I always running when something is going on? I don't get it. And it was something that I had to look inward. And I think I would say probably like 2021 to 2022 was when I had that realization, because it came in a form of always wanted to write down everything. It was something that I didn't want to. I think I'm explaining this poorly,
No,
but
no, no. Please. Doesn't have to
dementia,
be pretty and
yeah,
perfect. And no, not at all.
yeah. Dementia, and Alzheimer's runs in my family, and I've watched it through those that have been my loved ones, and I think there's always been this innate fear inside of me that has always worried of, what if I lose my memory, and what if something happens like this and I have to remember everything or else I'm going to forget it. And I think that's a really large part in why I started journaling, was because I wanted to capture all these memories and experiences of what I was going through because I didn't want to forget it. And when I was writing this book and putting all those entries into a Word document, it became so clear to me that yes, I do love travel. And yes, I do love to go to different places, but also there was this baseline of fear and anxiety that was shouting through each chapter and shouting through the words that I was writing. And I think when the final chapter comes, I have this epiphany of, wow, I had no clue that this is what was going on until I look back at it from a different perspective, from an outside perspective. And I think that was just such a game changer for me, that I had learned so much from writing the book and creating it and from my previous self.
That's amazing because I find so many of the authors that I've had on here, maybe the book that I'm talking about with them at that moment in those conversations came out of the pandemic.
Hmm.
I think maybe out of the 50 some odd authors, maybe almost 60 authors I've interviewed, maybe half of them wrote their books during the pandemic. It was like, okay, I
Wow.
have time, nothing's going on. This thing has been percolating in my head. People
Yeah.
have told me I should be doing this the way you found your stuff in the closet and you wanted to just it started off just as an exercise in cleaning up and organizing and cataloging. Look what it turned into. But it's amazing the silver lining that the pandemic did have, that
Mhm.
it brought people that clarity because they had time with themselves.
Yeah.
And I know for me, it's interesting you saying that you gained that clarity during the pandemic. Same for me, just because this started in 2021, this series,
Hmm.
and just from talking with people, um, a lot of people sharing traumas from their lives, disruptions in their lives, challenges in their lives. I love the depth to which this goes because it's not just like LinkedIn and everything's perfect and my business is going great, but you really learn what's behind that. So that's all to say is look what happens when we have just a little bit of time with ourselves and we slow down and we take a look back. You literally looking through the pictures of your journey.
Mhm.
That's incredible.
Thank you so much.
Um, I guess the other question I wanted to ask about the book, there are the 4 parts. So I'm assuming those are broken down into subsections or chapters.
Yes.
Could you just kind of go through some of the chapter titles um, of each section? You don't have to list them all. If you could just give a couple examples of what somebody might find. If there are certain stories that jump out to you, please share. Anything you want to
Sure.
do about just kind of giving the specifics of that journey through those sections.
So each chapter has a different name, and it's according to which country I went to. So the first chapter is England because that's when I studied abroad in England. And in the study abroad series, each chapter is going through Scotland and Germany and Ireland and all the different places that I went to when I was traveling each weekend. When I go through the study abroad, they're all the same. So each chapter is a different country. But I think also in each chapter, I have lessons learned. So when you open up a chapter, it will have the date, it'll have the temperature, what I packed, what I ate, the
Oh
goals
my
that I
god.
had. Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's
Okay.
it's extensive.
Captain's log.
Yeah.
That's
And,
awesome though.
yeah, so it's just like a really fun part. So this is kind of like what it looks like at the very beginning. And
Okay.
then at the end, it does have the photographs here.
So
And
cool.
so each one has the lessons learned. And the lessons learned is always something different. But that being said, each chapter tells a story that goes through what I've learned. And for example, one of the stories that I talk about is when I was a flight attendant, I was doing a self exam and I had noticed that I had a lump in my right breast. And I went to my doctor and they had to do a biopsy on it. And it was at this point in my life that I didn't know if I was going to have cancer or not. And I was absolutely terrified. So I did what I normally do at the time and I ran. I flew to Australia because I wanted just to go somewhere and get my mind off of it. And now I was a flight attendant, so I was able to not have to pay any fees other than international fees. And when I was in Australia, I was waiting for the phone call from my doctor to tell me if it was benign or malignant. And I did get the call. It was benign. And what I did to celebrate was I created this spontaneous trip to go to New Zealand. This was completely not planned. It happened the night before. One of my dorm mates from the hostel said, "Are you going to do anything to celebrate?" And I said, I wasn't really planning on it. And then they suggested that I fly to New Zealand the next day. I went down to the communal computers. I was able to book the ticket for the next day. I got a
Oh my
hostel
god.
and I flew out and I went to New Zealand for 3 days and I got to experience black water rafting in the glowworm caves and the Lord of the Rings Hobbiton and just a plethora of amazing experiences that I would have not had if all of these things wouldn't have happened. So I think stories like that go through where you learn that sometimes when you're scared, it does feel good to go to a different country and just fly because it takes your mind off of it. And I didn't want to be sitting around and waiting for that call to happen. So, yeah, that's like one of the examples in one of the chapters.
Speaking of going to a different place because you want to, you know, if something like a diagnosis happens in this location, this country, all right, I want to get out of here.
Mhm.
Go to a different place, and then obviously that to me brings up that idea of just energy.
Yeah.
And in bringing that up, were there certain countries that gave you, aside from you having not the lump
Mhm.
um, diagnosis or issue, aside from that, in general, were there certain countries that had higher energy for you, that you enjoyed more, that there was just something about it that stood out? I mean, obviously you have the spectrum of countries you've been to. Are there any that stand out that just kind of elevated your vibration?
Yes, Norway by far is my top favorite country that I've ever been to. I have gone back 3 times, which is a rarity because I normally don't go back to the same place twice because I'm always trying to go through new countries. But the landscape, the people, the beauty, everything about Norway just captivated me. And I was able to go there for our honeymoon. We saw the Northern Lights, and I got to go reindeer sledding and dog sledding and sit with the Sami people up north of the Arctic Circle. And I just feel like that was, I wish that everyone could go to Norway
Hmm.
and experience it because it was by far the most pleasant place I've ever been.
Yeah, it's funny. I just posted on LinkedIn that the article on the happiest countries in the world, and the US is nowhere in the top
Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
The US is nowhere in the top 20. Number 1
Mhm.
is Finland, which I expected. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's like it's all those countries where it's like Finland, Norway was number 7,
Yeah.
Denmark, Iceland is uh number 2 and number 3,
Mhm.
Sweden number 4, Israel number 5, Netherlands 6, Norway 7, Luxembourg 8, on and on and on. But it's just funny that we're nowhere
Yeah.
in that. Now, okay, here's another question stemming from that. See, this is how I go down these fucking tangents.
I'm
Here's a
just gonna
question
switch
that's
this real quick
yeah,
because I wanna make sure that I don't lose
yeah, absolutely.
power on my camera or my computer. Okay,
Um,
great.
so this is a heavy question, I guess. Having traveled to all these countries and obviously been born here, living here now, what do you see as the difference? I know that's a very heavy question, but in the spirit of that article, you don't have to go deep. Um, because I'm putting you on the spot, but what are your thoughts on that? Like the way other countries are versus the way we are here?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is I kind of get it. It makes sense because when I go to Norway, I see so many differences in the culture there than here. For example, I know this isn't Norway, but this is one of the main things that Scandinavians, particularly Swedish, that they have a custom to do. So every day during the workday, there is this practice that's called fika. And fika is a coffee break. And oftentimes the Swedes will have a coffee break for 10 to 15 minutes around like 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., where they go out, they grab coffee, and they just sit in the moment and they're not working on their work. Now, this oftentimes will happen twice a day between 10 to 11 a.m. and often between 2 to 3 p.m. And have just I that's just one example where they're taking some time away from their work, but then when they actually go and do work, it's much more strategic because they've been refreshed. They've had time to not think about work in a certain way and get away from what they're working on and then be able to show up energized. Also, another thing that is really common with the Scandinavian countries is that during the summertime, they'll often take off a month or two to go up to a cabin and stay at their cabin for that period of time to work on house projects or to spend time with family during midsummer. So, this is another aspect that I've seen that has been just so healthy. I feel like because you are able to get that refreshment and get that time to kind of have this experience of resetting and resetting your work, resetting your mindset. And I just feel that those two with a combination of also an abundance of exercise. A lot of people in Scandinavian and Nordic countries, they walk very often. They bike to and from work. It's something that is a common practice. And I just feel like those things are just so healthy compared to how it is for me and for a lot of others here in the US that it's so common for people to drive to work. It's so common for me to be working on something nonstop, starting at like 8 a.m., ending at 6 p.m., being home later, and then trying to catch up on work and making a meal really quickly because you're so tired. It's something that I've just had this realization of, wow, there's so much more that all these other countries are doing. And I wish that that was a more regular practice here in the States.
Have there been any practices that you've brought back with you?
There have been, not necessarily in regards to the workforce, just because I think it's so hard for me because I have that mindset of just get it done, go through everything you can. So I'm constantly working a lot, which is something I'm trying to work on. But I have had a idea of traditions that I've tried to incorporate in my family. So there are different things like for Advent, celebrating the first Sunday of Advent. That's really big in the Danish community. And having friends over to have like a Christmassy meal in the beginning of December, which is something I've never experienced before. It's often been putting up things after Thanksgiving and having the celebrations be Christmas Eve and Christmas. But, in Iceland, they have a tradition where on Christmas Eve, they exchange books and you spend Christmas Eve reading instead of going through and having all of Santa Claus and everything. I mean, they do have that, but it's books are the top. And I just think that that's such an amazing idea because you can be able to be so creative with it while also learning.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, And I mean, that part of a conversation can go on so long because just the differences between our country and other countries is
Mhm,
incredible. But at the same time, it's just like little actions that we can take, little
mhm.
gestures that we can execute with each other. Again, deeper conversation. But back to your book, Autumn, is there, because it is a memoir, are there are there things that people learned about you? I'm assuming they are, but certain ones that stand out that most of the people that knew you,
Mhm.
that know you, pointed out as maybe more people brought up that point of the book more than any other, something they didn't know about you. I mean, obviously you opened up a lot, but was it surprising to people? I mean, what were your family and friends saying about the book when it came out once they've read it and looked through it?
It's really interesting because I didn't actually realize this until friends had pointed it out to me, that in all of the different struggles and all of the things that I experience when I'm talking about in the book, I think the one word that they have said is resilience. And I feel
Yeah.
like resilience is something that I would have never thought of. I would have been like, oh, well, I did this and then I did this to deal with that. And they interpreted that as just resilience and being strong and courageous. And it was something that I had to take myself out of the position and fight those internal thoughts of, "Oh, they're just saying that because they're trying to be nice," but actually think about what they're saying because it's different people from different walks of my life that are saying these things to me, that I was able to have this realization of, "Wow, this is really amazing that people that I know who have heard some of the stories but maybe not all of them are coming back and saying these things to me of, even though life kept knocking you down, you got back up and you continued on. And I think that's something that I'm really thankful for, in the way of I'm thankful for them for telling me, but I'm also thankful for the experiences that made this book what it is.
Yeah, see, that's the tricky part with resilience is they see one thing on the outside across
Mhm.
different countries, different relationships you had from different chapters, literally different chapters, different sections of the book, people you knew in different areas. They see that and they're like, "Wow, I could never have told or could never tell that you were struggling or that you were thinking that internally because you were getting through it." So that's the tricky part with resilience is like, okay, it looks one way on the inside, but it's like, it's like a duck crossing a pond where
Yeah.
it looks graceful and put together. And then meanwhile, under the water, the poor fucking thing is like ready to pass out.
Yeah.
But that speaks a lot to resilience. Like, okay,
Mm.
is that I think it's one of those things where resilience is admirable, but there should be a footnote about, okay, now what's going on under the
Yeah.
surface?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's not that you're keeping a cool or a facade that's admirable. It's that you do have fight in you, right? You
Mhm.
do have the fight to keep going, but how are you taking care of yourself?
Yeah.
What's the self care? Who is that one friend that knows
Yeah.
everything? Who are those friends that you kind of tell a little more to?
Mhm.
So I think that's I never realized that or thought about that in terms of resilience, where people can see one thing and then underneath it, it just can be
Yeah.
completely different. So,
Yeah.
um, whatever it was that, what was it then? What was it that kind of kept you going through that? If I'm not getting too personal, what was it that
No.
kept you
Yeah.
resilient, as others would say?
So when I was 20 and my brother was 19, he went in to get his tonsils taken out. And I didn't even realize he was going in to get his tonsils taken out. He went into a hospital because he'd never been under anesthesia before. And he went into anaphylactic shock and he coded and he flatlined in the hospital. And I had gotten a call, it was like a random Tuesday. I had gotten a call from my parents saying that I needed to come home because I was still in college 2 hours away. And my brother's heart was stopped for 52 hours. They had him on an ECMO machine. pumping his blood and his heart for him. And then he was in a medically induced coma for 10 days. And after those 10 days, he we took him off of the life support, and he was able to breathe for the first time. And all the doctors, I mean, I was like 20 years old, and they're telling me that I need to start making preparations for my brother's funeral. And my parents are a mess, and they're not even in that mindset of like, we need to be thinking about this. They're just, in the loss of like, what's going to happen to our son. And after the 10 days of him being in the coma, he woke up. He was able to breathe on his own, but he had 4 strokes, and he had to relearn how to talk and walk and do a zipper again. He was in intensive rehab for 3 months. And when he came out of intensive rehab, he just surpassed everything every single doctor had said about him. They said that he was not going, that he would have brain damage, that there would be a chance that he would never be able to talk again. And I was able to watch my brother grow, but also just get through everything. The most courageous person ever. And he's graduated with his bachelor's. He has his master's. He's married. He has 3 dogs, owns his own house, and he works for the Red Cross. And it's just like this amazing thing because he went through such a traumatic point in his life, and we were there for him. But I saw what it meant to literally not know if your sibling was going to survive, and what it meant also for them to fight physically for their life. And I think having had experienced that, it made me realize how precious life really is, how incredible it can be, and how much we have to fight for it. And I think that is really just an ode to him for what he went through.
What a valuable lesson. I mean, none of us wants that to happen to any of our siblings, anyone we know, anyone we care about. But to have that blessing of him going through and coming out the other side like that, it just puts everything in perspective, right?
Yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that story. So, Autumn, now that we've gone through that book, do you have anything on the horizon for anything else you might want to do in terms of writing, in terms of photography books? Is what's next on your list if you do have one?
I
And I apologize. I always force my authors, I guess, to answer this question, even though they might have just put this book out. But general ideas, is there anything on the horizon that you would look to in terms of what you would want to put out next?
Yes, yes. I would love to have a second book, and I want it to be 40 in 40. So 40 countries before I turn 40. I think that that would be another chapter in my life of exploring more of what it's like to be in your 30s and having this realization that you're, continuing to grow and learn. But I also have had this idea to do a coffee table book of just my photography, because I feel like that would be something that would be a really nice additive to my addition to my business, and something that I think it would be fun to create.
Absolutely. Um, Autumn, what lessons do you hope people take away from your book? We've talked about so much, covered so many areas, um, the highs and the lows of life. What would you hope people would take away by going through your book, reading your book?
I talk about my brother a lot in my book and what happened to him. I talk about my breast cancer scare, and I talk about what it's like to be bullied and have anxiety. And I think the number one thing that I would want people to really get out of reading would be to cherish what you have, to be able to look around and stop in the moment and think about what's happening in front of you. because I think the realization of life can change so quickly and you don't realize it until it's already changed. With that being said, I also hope that those who read it will come out of reading it with having this idea of, I'm going to do something that I've never done before. I'm going to book this trip. I'm going to do a solo travel. I'm going to go to this brand new grocery store. I'm going to try something that I normally wouldn't do. And I feel like that would be the best compliment out of anything, is that someone is able to take something and make it their own and try a new experience, because think of all the ways that things could have gone wrong. My brother could not be here today. My breast cancer scare could have been something that could have been really bad. All of these little things could have gone a completely different way. And I feel like if someone is going through something or not going through something, just being able to try something different and experience it is the most precious and incredible gift.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, obviously anecdotal in this country, is just how much, I mean, obviously we've seen the last couple of years how much people don't really step outside of what they know.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, having different experiences, talking to different people, seeing things through other people's eyes. I mean, that's just an incredible lesson. Those are some great lessons to hope that people bring out. And yeah, it speaks to everything you said about Norway and happiness and just appreciating what people have, what they have in their life. I think if people took it the moment, especially in this country, you talked about how fast paced everything is, you know, the pressure of go, go, go. And sometimes it's a badge of honor to be stressed out and overbooked and burnt out. But I think it's a great reminder to just step back, that it doesn't take huge monumental shifts. It's just, like you said, like trying something new, taking a different way to work, you know, trying a new restaurant. Again, I'm not a traveler, but to me, those little highs are trying new places, going
Mhm.
somewhere I've never been before. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Autumn, what book has inspired you or made an impact on you?
Ooh, um, honestly, I would have to say, oh, this is a tough question.
If you have to give two or three, that's fine.
Yeah.
I won't hold you to one.
A lot of the Scandinavian books, honestly, I think they have really made an impact in my life. There are some like Nordicanda, that's one that I really like. The Art of Living Danishly, that's another one. Um, I would say, sorry, my mind is just drawing a blank
That's all
right
right. It's
now.
all right.
But in regards to travel, there is The Yellow Envelope. That one is by Kim Dunham. And I really love her approach to travel and her way through life because it's really inspiring. Um, the Nordic Theory of Everything, I would say that one is one as well.
Of course. Uh, in wrapping up, Autumn, is there anything that you want to share with this audience? Anything you're up to today? Anything you want to put out there? Anything that I might not have asked?
I would say that if you are interested in following along with my journey, my Instagram is Autumn Carolyn Photography, and Carolyn has two N's. My website is autumncarolyn.com, and I'm on YouTube, TikTok, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, kind of all over. I also have a blog as well on my website. And I think just one thing I wanted to say was just thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk with me about traveling in wonder and to go deeper with me. Because I know that sometimes some people can be a little, iffy when it comes to going deeper and talking about experiences that can be really hard. I think, though, that it's just been such a pleasure speaking with you about these different experiences that have happened to my life, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
No, absolutely. It's my pleasure. It's always tricky when I have people on and they mention certain things and I get curious about things and it's like, do I ask? Do I not ask? Is it cool? Is it not cool?
Mhm.
It's not for gratuitous reasons. It's not, even though yes, this goes out and on social media and whatnot, and there is an audience. Any conversation I have is one that I would have even if the
Mhm.
camera was off.
Yeah.
We wouldn't sit down and be like an interview format, but I think it's important. I think what plays into the bullying that we talked about, what plays into the anxiety that we talked about, what plays into the happiness that we talked about, right?
Mm.
All those things not related in general, but there's like an undercurrent of, do you know the person that's in front of you? Do you know your community? Are you curious about somebody?
Yeah.
So I want to be as respectful as possible, but I don't want to just kind of speak to the facade of who we all are on Facebook or our website or this or
Mm.
that. I want to get to know somebody. I want to get to know who's in front of me. So I'm always appreciative of, and I hope people know that, of what people share with me, and that what I ask when I ask it is not for anyone else except for my just curiosity of humanity, to hear what somebody has gone through, to appreciate it, to say, I too have experienced that. You're motivating me to open up a little more. You're teaching me to learn more about myself. So I appreciate it. It's always, I try to be cautious with it, but it is, I hope everybody does know, it is just genuine curiosity just to know my fellow human. So I appreciate your words.
Yeah. Thank you.
And again, Autumn's book is Traveling in Wonder, a travel photographer's tales of wanderlust. And if there's anything that I might have missed, there's so much to cover, limited time. Although I kept her here over an hour, the rabbit holes that I can go down. Just let me know. I'll reach out to Autumn, see what kind of insight, wisdom, knowledge she can share, and I can get back to you if anybody has any questions that I might have missed. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.